Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight on our news.
It's an interview you have to see to believe for the Environment Minister on the Obon energy seal.
The Anglerston MP slams the government over the latest Obon Energy's revelations.
Case dismissed against those Cabbage Beach vendors. The details are straight ahead.
What's going on with this rainy weather? Stay tuned. We have the details on how long it's expected to last.
Our news is brought to you by Alive.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Christina Dragovich. Topping news tonight, Environment Minister Romuald Ferreira on the defense over the $5.5 billion Obon Energy's deal for Grand Bahama. The Environment Minister has been silent since concerns were raised over the environmental impact the project could have to that island. And today, while being questioned by our news team, Ferreira gave them a run for their money. Literally. Here's Kyle Joaquin.
Christina, it was definitely something you have to see to believe. The interview started right here next to the House of Assembly and somehow ended up along Bay Street, up Charlotte Street, and right next to the Court of Appeal.
You have to admit, I said to you that I was on my way somewhere. Right. So I don't want to call this an ambush, but I did say I'm trying to accommodate you. I said that right at the beginning.
Well, we've been
but just send it to you,
Minister.
The walk lasted all of 9 minutes. Just as the Environment Minister exited Parliament, he was greeted at the door by Nassau Guardian Managing Editor Candia Dames and myself, both seeking his response to mounting concerns raised by numerous environmentalists over the Obon Energy's oil refinery project on Grand Bahama.
The Office of the Prime Minister is charged with heads of agreement. The Best Commission is also under the Office of the Prime Minister, and they are charged with reviewing EIAs and EMPs. So therefore, it would be out of turn for me to speak on those issues. They don't fall within the purview of my ministry.
Ferreira dismissed our questions and insisted he will only speak on the matter after the Prime Minister addresses the ongoing firestorm engulfing the project and its main players. His comments came an hour after the Bahamas National Trust released a strong statement saying the BNT has asked the government to provide the exact location of the site and to see the full heads of agreement. We've also asked for the opportunity to weigh in on the environmental impact assessment before completion.
The BNT, they said they wrote the Office of the Prime Minister requesting to see the heads of agreement, and they have concerns about the location of where this site would go.
Okay.
I mean, as the minister responsible for the environment, do you have a response to that?
What I mean, the minister responsible for the environment isn't responsible for Crown lands.
But they're concerned about the location, though.
The minister responsible for environment isn't responsible for Crown lands and isn't responsible for heads of agreement. It isn't responsible for environmental impact assessments.
This is the Bahamas National Trust.
I haven't read their statement. You promised to send it to me.
This is
look at
the second paragraph right here.
But
The Bahamas National Trust in the statement also said, BNT wishes to state very clearly, however, that notwithstanding the results of the EIA, even if there are local project impacts that the Bahamas Environment and Science and Technology Commissions and the government might deem acceptable if mitigated, we cannot envisage any scenario where BNT could support this project. Ferreira's silence on the issue is in stark contrast to the vocal Ferreira, who sees every opportunity to blast the former PLP government over a number of environmental issues when the FNM was in opposition.
why is the government, my question is this, why isn't the government coming clean? Why aren't the cards on the table?
I'm asking you about your advocacy.
Oh, it's still there.
You've made a name for yourself as this friend of the environment, this environmental advocate.
No, you're asking me about things that don't fall under my purview. That's what you're asking me about. But you're framing it in that way. But you know that that's not really what you're asking. You're asking me.
With all due respect, I know. With all due respect, Minister, I know exactly what I'm asking you.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're asking me as well. I'm just saying that you're asking me about stuff that's not. Let's cross the road. That's not in my purview.
But again, not having the support of the BNT, regardless of the outcome of the EIA, what does that mean for the project?
What are you asking me to comment on BNT's comments?
Yes, they said regardless of the outcome.
But I haven't seen it. I asked you to send it to me.
I showed it to you just now. But I showed you the line.
You're flashing something that.
You can take the phone.
Send it to me. You have my number.
But the chase didn't end there.
Will you return our calls when we call you and
Don't
ask
I
you
always?
to comment?
I think that's unfair, their mistakes.
No, I'm not suggesting
always?
that you don't ever, but I'm suggesting that on this issue, you certainly have not been available. That is accurate. That is accurate. That is
The heads of
accurate.
agreement and evaluation of the EIA fall under the purview of the Office of the Prime Minister.
So you-
I think you are fully aware that the BESS Commission falls under the Office of the Prime Minister.
Right.
And you're fully aware that the heads of agreement falls under the Office of the Prime Minister.
But I'm asking you, right, as an advocate for the environment and as the Environment Minister, were you comfortable with the handling of this Obon deal from an environmental perspective? Is that not a fair question? Like, I'm not asking you what the BESS Commission did or what the Office of the Prime Minister did. I'm asking you whether you're comfortable. Were you comfortable and are you comfortable with the manner in which this whole HOA was rolled out in the absence of an EIA and locking us to the agreement?
The Ministry of Environment stands ready to assist in the process.
You didn't answer
as
the
called
question.
upon.
I'm asking
Well, I
you if
explained to
you're
you, I tried to explain to you, and I did already, about the typical processes. You don't have to take my word for it. You can go online and check, and you'll see that an EIA is a planning tool, and it normally happens after a heads of agreement. There's nothing unusual about that.
That environmental impact assessment, according to the government, is currently underway. However, opponents to the project have insisted the heads of agreement should not have been signed until that assessment was complete.
He's going to speak on it on Wednesday, and I'm sure you'll have lots of questions after that.
You're dodging the question respectfully, but I'll leave it there. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Minister.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Kyle Joaquin.
While Ferreira was on the defensive, Englerston MP Glenys Hanna Martin was on the attack as she slammed the Obon deal, saying it was associated with a cornucopia of crooks. Hanna Martin also questioned how the government could get involved in a project that, based on the controversial heads of agreement, has placed Bahamians at a disadvantage. Jasmine Brown reports.
Hanna Martin was vocal in her criticisms as she slammed not only the heads of agreement, but also the government and the executives at Obon.
You'll find these people, Mr. Speaker. You actually got to do, this almost seems to be an effort to find such a collection, Mr. Speaker. This ain't no coincidence. This don't look like no coincidence, Speaker. Unless you look really bad, Mr. Speaker.
Controversy has surrounded the project since February 19th, when Obon non-executive chairman Peter Krieger signed what appeared to be the heads of agreement during a press conference that was televised live. But a Nassau Guardian investigation revealed that Krieger did not sign his own name. Instead, he signed the name of Obon President Satpal Dunna. Hanna Martin questioned how the government could do business with Krieger, considering his checkered past.
You all bring investors of dubious character. The face of the investment, someone whose role has been shifting before our eyes and has more lately, well, when I wrote this last night, he was more lately described as an ambassador. But I see in the papers today, he's being called again a non-executive chairman. So we got a ping pong over who this man is. But whoever he is, we know that he has a conviction of fraud. He is being barred by the SEC from engaging in a multiplicity of activities. But we bring him here to invest in our country, Mr. Speaker.
Last week, Dunna wrote the office of the Prime Minister saying Krieger had consent from the company to represent it at the February 19th signing. However, he did not explain why Krieger signed what appeared to be his name.
If this wasn't real, we'd be laughing our heads off right now. While signing someone else's name, not his own. He signed someone else's name. The same man who can't go do nothing in America. In their presence. What? And anyway.
The Englerston MP says what is most disturbing about the entire ordeal is the lack of answers from the Minnis administration.
Why have there been no answers to date for the questions and concerns the Bahamian people have about this matter? Where is the mandated accountability to this Parliament, Mr. Speaker? And while the government is silent, can't hear a word. In light of the bizarre happenings surrounding this Obon deal, and I say bizarre, we need to know if Bahamians are associated with this company. And if so, who are they? We're trying to understand what is motivating this strange, illogical, peculiar type of thing that's happening, Speaker. Speaker, because it is not just the suspicious circumstances surrounding the deal. not just the cornucopia of criminals associated with the deal, but of even greater concern is the substance of this deal.
Reporting for our News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Well, one environmentalist is claiming that the Obon Energy's deal would have never been approved in the United States with no public consultation and what she called egregious concessions.
I would like to see the Obon deal canceled. You know, people are concerned. This would never have happened. How do you have a man signing a document who's not signing his own name? How does that, how, I don't know. I don't even get how they would let that happen.
Re-Earth President Sam Duncombe says the Free National Movement came into government with promises of transparency and accountability, yet both have gone missing now that the F&M administration is in power.
There was no public consultation. We were never given an opportunity to look at what was being proposed, and that's what any civilized democratic country is supposed to be doing.
Duncombe says she would have expected more from Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis, a man of science. In 2018, she says an environmental impact assessment should carry more weight when new projects are on the table. Rather, she says, it feels as though the Bahamas has gone back in time and allowed the unacceptable to happen.
It feels to me like I've stepped back 28 years. When I first started talking about the environment, I feel like we've gone back to square one. How is it that an American company that would have never been able to do this in the U.S. without an environmental impact assessment, not being able to have that environmental impact assessment weigh in very heavily on what can and cannot be done? I mean, when you talk about mitigation, by that time, the way this deal is structured, where the government can't shut them down for any reason, they can only mitigate. By that time, the horse is out of the gate.
The environmentalist also spoke to a recent Obon Energy's ad published in local newspapers. In that ad, Obon Energy's president, Satpal Dunna, said people should not mind the noise in the market, rather watch the price of fish. Duncombe says the ad was offensive and disturbing, but she added that Bahamians have dealt with such language from developers in the past.
You don't come to a country and start, acting like the people's concerns mean nothing. Mm-hmm. That is just not acceptable. The arrogance and the contempt that these people have for us are quite frankly despicable, and the contempt that the government is showing toward us is beyond words. They need to know that people are getting fed up. We were fed up with the PLP, their lies, their deceit, and now it looks like the F&M is doing the exact same thing, and that's just not acceptable.
In other news, 10 people facing several charges in relation to the destruction of a fence blocking an access point on Cabbage Beach are now free from prosecution. Jared Higgs tells us how their legal saga came to an end.
The 10 were charged back in March 2016 with 3 counts each of obstruction and a charge of disorderly behavior in relation to the destruction of a fence valued at $800 on Casino Drive near to Cabbage Beach. After a nearly 2-year legal dilemma, all charges against them dropped. After multiple delays in their case, attorney Branville McCartney says the battle ended today.
The prosecution made an application to withdraw the charges against all defendants.
When the group was charged, then opposition leader Dr. Hubert Minnis, who participated in the protests, vowed that if he became prime minister, the convictions against the protesters would be expunged. Earlier this year, those protesters hit out at Prime Minister Minnis, saying they felt abandoned by him. Press Secretary Anthony Newbold later reassured the protesters, telling them that Minnis still intended to live up to his commitment. McCartney says as a result of nearly a dozen adjournments, they'll be seeking significant damages for malicious prosecution.
We indicated from the beginning that this was a malicious act by the prosecution. As a matter of fact, many of the charges relevant to this case, some defendants weren't never arrested for, or cautioned, or interviewed on. The first time they saw the charges was at the court hearing.
Some of the 10 former accused expressed continued frustration with the Free National Movement, which they accused of supporting them when it was politically convenient.
What you see here today, many people coming out to support vendors and taxi drivers who have been charged, especially for damaging offense. And entering the court today, other charges were brought forth that the men knew nothing about. And it was quite obvious that these are trumped up charges. What it would appear is the Attorney General obviously needs to step in and nullify this entire situation.
Dr. Menace, he's the one, the first day that this all started, it started with us. And then the second day, he summoned a march. And then 2 years later, it's like he's abandoning us.
Social Services Minister Lanisha Roll and House Speaker Halson Moultrie were among the attorneys originally representing members of the group.
I want to take this opportunity to thank Brianville McCartney for standing with these people for 2 long years. Yes. I also want to thank Dawn Sanders, who also stood with us. Yes. There were many other lawyers that started up with us, and all of them have abandoned.
Reporting for our news, I'm Jared Higgs.
And New Providence residents were greeted by heavy rain and flooding this morning as they began their work week. It's testing the patience of homeowners in low-lying areas such as Pinewood Gardens. Giorgio Bain has that.
Water past their knees. Well, this is a problem that persons here in Pinewood Gardens say they're just sick and tired of dealing with. But according to Chief Meteorologist Basil Dean, the weather is expected to stop by this evening. Our news team hit the streets of New Providence to check out the severity of the flooding caused by heavy rainfall. Rosemary Johnson, who has lived in the Pinewood Gardens area for 30 years, recently lost her husband and was brought to tears thinking of having to deal with these kind of issues on her own. According to Johnson, she lives with sandbags in her home at all times. No matter how little it rains, the widow says the street floods, sending rainwater inside of her home.
The water have gone down a whole lot, but if you look also on the side, you'll see where the water went up to there and all about there on the porch. And maybe if they would come and clean the drainage, maybe some of the water would go down. But other than that, it is a problem, it is a headache, and I wish somebody could come and do something about it.
Clifford Roll, who has lived in Pinewood Gardens for 13 years, says flooding is just the beginning of the problem.
And even to drive to this water, it can really damage your car.
Meanwhile, over on Halifax Road, just off Tony Williams-Darling Highway, Hazel and Willard Clare said flooding prevented them from leaving their homes on Sunday and again today.
Water is so high around here. You can see from the road that we can't get out, you know. And when the rain is coming down, the water comes in the house as well.
According to Claire, the issue wasn't this bad until they paved Harold Road, and now the drains cannot handle the large amount of water that comes with each passing shower.
And since they paved it over, we now suffer flooding. We have 2 drain wells on Halifax Road, but nobody cleans them.
It was a similar scene on Blake Road near the New Providence Community Center. Chief Meteorologist Basil Dean chalked it up to a low to mid-level trough that moved over the northwest Bahamas, dumping about 5.29 inches of rain.
To produce some very heavy thunderstorm activity, as you said, on Sunday, resulting in some heavy downpours as well, which led to flooding in many of the low-lying areas of New Providence. That mid to low-level trough is now moving towards the east, but will continue to generate some light to moderate intermittent rains for the balance of this day, taking us into the evening hours.
Though motorists and homeowners are fed up with the flooding caused by heavy rain, children in the Pinewood Gardens area seem to be enjoying the wet weather. Reporting for Our News, I'm Giorgio Bain.
Still to come on Our News, the Minister of Health puts non-performing clinicians with big salaries on alert. That and more when Our News returns.